You're watching the Team Nerd Tech Show with your hosts, Tim Gillen and Ruthy Kierlin.
Well, hello, nerds. Hey, you're nerding with us again this week on this week's edition of the Team Nerd Tech Show. Thanks for joining us. Tim Gillen here, Terrapin Networks, Traverse City, Michigan, small business tech specialist, and here joined by my co-host this week and every week, and our producer and my daughter from Queens, New York, Ruthy Kierlin.
Hi, Tim. How are you this week?
Good, thank you. Good.
Good. So this is episode 50, this is our last episode of season 1. Next episode is the first episode of season 2. So if you are watching and following along at home and you want to check up on things, we're going to start categorizing them on the website under seasons. So this will be the last episode of season 1, number 50. So today we're going to be talking about, in tech news, we're talking about how 23andMe has recently made a huge staff cut, which probably means, well, it does mean that interest in these types of ancestry and DNA tracking is starting to wane. And we're going to kind of weigh in on what that means. For Tech Tip today, we're going to be talking about what you can look for if you're installing a VoIP system in your business, which is Voice over Internet Protocol, a type of internet phone, if you will. And then we want to talk about, like, why wouldn't you just get a landline? Like, why would you go with VoIP? And then finally, for Tech Gadget, we're talking today about how Google is, spoiler, actually listening to you all the time. They're actually listening. So who knew? But we're going to be discussing that as well. So let's get into it.
Okay.
All right. Welcome back to the Team Nerd Tech Show with your host, Tim Gillen. I am Ruthy Kierlin. So let's move on into tech news now and talk about 23andMe. So first up, I want to hear what you think about 23andMe and other DNA ancestry gathering types of where people willingly send it out.
Yeah, 23andMe is probably the most common. Ancestry.com is doing it. This is a tagline on to the interest people have with genealogy. I want to be able to tell people I'm related to King Henry VIII and therefore I'm royalty.
Or that I really am as Polish as I look.
Yeah, right. And all those things. And you basically give a little swab of your DNA, a little piece of your spit, and you send it back to them. And they then do a DNA breakdown and can tell you where you're from and some of your ancestry. Isn't that neat? And it turns out we're as German as my grandmother used to tell me, and all those kind of things, just like you mentioned. And of course, they have a lot of really funky things about them with relationship to privacy, because you're giving your DNA data to a massive commercial database of DNA data. This is not the National Institutes of Health.
Exactly.
I'd be a little squeezy with them on some things. Their security isn't that. Imagine what you're actually giving to 23andMe.
You're giving a piece of yourself that cannot be changed. Your DNA is your DNA. It's not like your identity. If your identity gets stolen, you can repair that. If your DNA gets stolen, if it falls into the wrong hands, that's some really terrifying stuff.
Yeah, it certainly can't be. And keeping in mind, again, it's a commercial entity.
Yeah.
So they're selling this. And they have a right to sell it. You give them a right to sell it. You give Ancestry.com a right to sell it. And then they have tie-into early genealogical records from Ellis Island, from the census records from a century ago in New York City. And you find out that a great-great-great-grandparent lived somewhere in Manhattan, or those kind of things. Really fascinating stuff.
And there's no doubt that it's not fascinating. Of course
it's terrific. And all that kind of thing that I've just described, I'm not sure that's all wonderful. But hey, let's use technology. And let's use your DNA. Okay, now we're not going to put a name on it. It's just going to be your DNA. And we'll cross-reference that in our database, and we'll find out exactly a lot of things about your relatives. Now, being as they have no DNA records for your great whatever in Manhattan in 1910, it was all kind of a ruse anyway. But because there isn't any, they can tell some historical origin through DNA, but that's it. And even that is a lot less exact than they suggest. And on top of that, they're selling it.
I think the fact that your DNA, you're willingly giving the one thing, like I said, about you that you can't change, that makes up you completely. And they're selling that information in order to,
Well, they're
have their
selling it.
analytics.
They're
And
selling it to life insurance companies.
yeah,
They're
I think
selling it to
that's
health
just a
insurance
very
companies.
icky feeling.
So never mind Medicare for all. Let's even that could have an effect here. Let's think about commercial insurance, who now wants to buy this stuff from 23andMe or someone like that. I keep saying that because it's not just 23andMe.
Yeah.
And divine who you are and have that affect your health insurance because your grandfather died of cancer. And it turns out they think, or they found some genetic mutation,
marker,
and now they want to not cover or increase your coverage or decrease your coverage or all those things because somebody spit into a cup and sent in $25. That's kind of dopey, isn't it? Is that what we want? I don't think it is. I certainly don't want that. And
well, no, I feel like it's an invasion of privacy.
It's a complete invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
And when they're selling it to insurance companies, and which they are, and then they're selling it to vitamin supplement people who they can now tailor vitamins for your DNA. Just think of how many tentacles this can have. There's a lot of tentacles that you're willingly giving them so that you can tell people that you're either related to King Henry VIII or that you're more Irish than you thought you were, because being Irish is really awesome, as we know.
I think the tide is definitely turning, which is why they're starting to lay off so many people. They were, as a financial company, once they went public, they were going up, 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 up. And because I believe they are public, they were going up, up, up. And now they're just having these slumping sales. And they've laid off, I think, 100 people, something like that recently.
Yeah, they've laid off a certain portion. It's and I don't know how much of that's privacy. I honestly don't know. I don't know. I'd love to think it's because people are understanding that it maybe isn't quite this nifty little thing that everyone seems to think it is.
Yeah.
Of course, you'd never get me to do something like that in a million years.
No, I wouldn't. No.
And most of these there's so many apps like this that are the same way. Think about any kind of location app, sort of does the same thing. These apps that you can put on your phone so you can track where your children are. Now, they can be really valuable for many things. But what do you know, like this one really popular one called Life 360, I think it's Allstate Insurance, ended up buying most of that because, man, they love that kind of data. And so now you've turned in your actual life and the way you live as a commercial thing for companies on the backside to buy and sell. Now, some people think, what's the big deal? Everybody knows where I'm going. I have nothing to hide, all those things.
Yeah.
Here at the Team Nerd Tech Show, as people who listen to us know, we have a stake in the ground that says, no,
we have banished the phrase, what do I have to hide? We have banished that from our lexicon here.
That's not a good thing to say or to think, because they're hoping you think that. I mean, that's kind of the guilt into proven. Is there something you're trying to hide? That life you live in that you think you need to hide everything. Well, that's none of your business. And that's kind of the starting and stopping place. That's kind of where liberty can start and stop, because if you're willingly giving that kind of thing up, and these commercial entities are not into it because they want to help your life. There's nothing wrong with this. They're commercial entities. They're there. They exist to show a profit to their shareholders, whether they're public or private, which is what they're supposed to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But you might want to educate yourself and say, okay, why would I want to participate in this? What's the actual benefit to me? As kind of just a final note to keep in mind, these are commercial entities, and you're giving them this information for them to do their own buying and selling with, which is what commercial entities do, and we're in favor of that. But you want to think about your willingness to participate in that for what?
Welcome back to the Team Nerd Tech Show with your host, Tim Gillen. My name is Ruthy Kirwan. So today I want to talk about for our tech tip, which is when we talk about things that are very actionable in your business. This is always the part of the show where we talk about something that you can take what you learned today and apply it into your business from the word go. So the concept I want to talk about today is a VoIP, which is a voiceover, which stands for VoIP. It stands for Voice over Internet Protocol. Essentially, it's an internet phone. And I want you to tell me why I would do a VoIP for my business instead of just a landline. Like, why go to the trouble?
Well, partly because it's no trouble at all.
Okay.
What VoIP is, we tend to refer to as voice over IP, but truly IP stands for Internet Protocol in that case. But what that actually means is that you can use your internet connection to provide your telephone connectivity. So, and where you're going to use VoIP, VoIP, is where you use that to replace a landline. Now, the landline these days may come from your internet provider. You may have a separate deal through a Charter or Comcast to provide phone lines, and or you may have something like AT&T, whomever, and getting your phones in through old school copper lines, which is fine too. But they've made those a lot more expensive, and they're pushing their people to get the phone lines through the internet connection that goes to your building.
But when you say they, you mean communication companies like
Yes,
AT&T,
thank you. Yes,
Verizon?
the communication providers. Now,
Okay.
with a regular landline of any kind, whether it comes from AT&T or, as an example, on old-fashioned copper or Charter, and they break it out into a different box, you need a phone system inside your building, which most companies have. But you need a phone system inside your building. You go strictly to voice over IP, you can get rid of the phone system. You don't need to have a $20,000 phone system that has a finite life to it. You just have phones that plug into your internet connection. Most of the phones, all of the phones have a way to daisy chain that, meaning you can plug the phone into the internet from the wall cable that you might have next to your desk, and then plug your phone or your computer into the phone to route that through there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you want to be a little careful what kind of phones you buy, because a lot of them are slower. You lose some speed doing that. The reason that's an issue is most of us are going into buildings where wherever someone's desk is, there's one internet connection there. There's maybe an internet and a phone, but the old school phone connection wouldn't work for that. So you're going to have to use the internet connection. Now, again, why would you use this? Why not just go to mobile phones?
Yeah.
Because a business still needs a phone system, because you want to be able to forward from the call comes in. I need to speak with service. I need to speak with sales. I need to speak with marketing. And so you forward that around. You have a way to be able to have voicemails that you can move around to people. Have a single voicemail account for general questions that several people can respond to or can hear.
Yeah.
All those kind of things that you need in a phone system in a commercial entity. Now, if you're real small, if you're just say a contractor, there's just a couple of you, maybe you can get by with each of you having your own cell phone. But even then, it starts to become a little bit more difficult. There's no doubt that Fred will be getting some messages that are meant for Mary, and then he's got to somehow forward those around.
So having a singular phone for the business.
Same reason that I mean, a lot of us at home have no need for a landline of any kind. Mom and dad just use their cell.
Yeah.
The kids just use their cell, especially if they're older children, and that's all we need. That's fine for that. Because keep in mind, though, any kind of a mobile phone, cell phone, is a one-to-one.
Yeah, it's got passwords protected and all of that.
Well, it's me and my phone. It's in my pocket.
Yes.
Someone wants to call my wife and they call me, say, no, you got to call her. Here's her number. I don't I'll connect you, which we do in a business application all the time, don't we? Mm-hmm. And very common. So for a business to move to a VoIP system, what that generally means, and where I see it, is okay, our phone system is kind of shot. We bought it 8-10 years ago, 12 years ago, or we need to add a couple lines, or it's got little parts, we can't fix it. Instead of buying a new phone system for $8,000 or $10,000 and having somebody install it, maybe we should just go to a VoIP system. Tim, what do you know about that? We happen to have one that we resell as part of our cloud services, and we don't necessarily push it. We don't think of ourselves as a phone company, but we do supply phones for a lot of our customers, which are all smaller.
It's usually a lot more inexpensive to set up a VoIP, isn't it?
Significantly more expensive. So here, for example, you're going to pay, generally when you're doing VoIP systems for a commercial side, you're going to pay somewhere between $30 and $40 per month per handset. So if I've got 5 phones, I might have one on the service counter, and then everybody else has one at their desk, and there's 5 altogether. I'm going to pay $30, $40 a month per each one of those. But that's it. That's it. My internet connection, I'm already paying for anyway. I take the firewall and I segment part of that data and say I want a certain part of data that's coming through my internet connection to be reserved for the phones for voice traffic. And then that's it. I'm not paying $80 per line to AT&T. There's no lines. 15 people can call at the same time. It's not going to matter. If I've only got 5 phones, the 6th person who calls in, if they're all ringing at the same time, which doesn't happen, but let's say it just goes to an automated attendant, all your automated attendant. And by that, I mean, hello, you've reached whomever, we can't answer the phone right now. That automated attendant, which routes it off to voicemail or routes it off to the various extensions, that's all included. Voicemail is all included. You can forward things to your cell phone. That's all included. You can change the stuff online very quickly. If you're having a training day or it's a snow day, you can route that phone to just call your cell phone directly if nobody's in the office by just
you can
going
just
on
do
the
that
internet.
super easy when you have
super
a
easy right over the internet. Yeah. You can have a phone at a home office. You might have a sales office, and they just plug that phone into the internet, and they're on the same system.
Or that's just like what we talked about in our last episode about sending employees remotely.
Yeah,
it would be
exactly.
super easy with a VoIP.
Very much so. And we have a lot of executives who have a home office that they work from a certain part of time, and they have one of the phones in there, which puts them on the system. And you may have a small sales office, a small service office in another town that you're only at a couple days a week, but there's a phone there. So when you're there, you can actually work and you're on the regular system. And for example, one of the things you can easily do on a VoIP system is what are called SIP trunks, SIP, which stands for Session Initiation Protocol. But what that means is I can have an app on my mobile phone, my iPhone or my Android, that talks to this SIP trunk, which is attached to my VoIP system. It sounds complicated, but for those of us who do this, it's not. And now when I make or receive a call through that app, it looks like I'm calling from the company. And I'll give you an example. We have a customer who does a lot of scheduling, and they have one of their staff members lives down in Ohio, and she does a lot of scheduling and follow-up scheduling and stuff for them. But she's the home office she's in is not particularly wired. She's on a wireless connection. It's a very good wireless connection. It doesn't lend itself so well to have a regular desk phone. So we set up a SIP phone through her cell phone, which has a good, strong connection, wireless inside this building that she's in. When she makes a call on behalf of the company up in Traverse City to people receiving it, it looks like it's coming from the company in Traverse City.
Okay.
It is. That's why she's
helpful.
calling. And also, she's not exposing her personal cell phone out to customers who have no need to know that, and there's no need for that to be. It doesn't confuse the issue. Then when they call back to that number, they look on their cell phone, they call back to the number, it goes back into the main number. So it's all part of the same system, and she's just on a mobile phone. And then they also have an office in a separate town, just a single one that they're not even in 5 days a week, but we have a phone in there that's a regular desk phone that's wired. So when they're in there, they can make and receive calls and just be forwarded over to that number. Someone can call in looking for John. John's in the Petoskey office today. We'll forward the phone that rings in that office. John picks it up. It's completely transparent. It's real simple for the users. Once someone like us sets it up, it's completely transparent to your customers. And you're not paying $80 a month for AT&T or whomever per line. And you think, well, I got to get 4 lines. I'm getting busier. I have to buy 5 because people are getting busy signals. All that stuff goes away. Completely goes away.
If you're a small business who wants to set up a VoIP system, what should you be looking for in the company that you bring in to set up the VoIP system?
Well, if you're dealing with someone like us who does small business team tech support.
You mean Terrapin Networks? Yeah.
Thank you. Someone like us here at Terrapin Networks who does small business team tech support. Likely they have some kind of a provider who they work through. And it would be a commercial provider, more than likely. If not, any of the phone system providers in your town now do this kind of thing. It'd be unusual, even in a smaller community, where someone who sells phone systems isn't providing this exact service. Now, if you want to do it completely on your own, there's some out there, even like Vonage, which isn't always maybe not the first choice on the business side, but can be used on the home side. Ring Central is a pretty common one. There's a variety of them. I really don't want to recommend any because I don't have any actual experience with them. But there's several out there. You could do a search for voice over IP and you'll get 8 million. You got to be a little bit careful because there's a lot of them out there, and some are reselling 3 layers down, and they're not maybe quite as solid. That's where,
when you say solid, do you mean secure? Or what do you mean by the word
No, it's not so
solid?
much secure. They might have downtime and they may not have all
Oh,
the same
okay.
features. And
Got it.
they're and if they do have some downtime at all, um, if they do have some downtime at all, they may be a little slow to respond. And let me give you one more real benefit to these kind of phone systems. Let's say there's a big winter storm and the power goes out at your company. Your phone
Yeah.
system's not down because the phone system's on the internet. So even if nobody can take a call, there's somebody answering the phones and it's getting routed to voicemail. And the way we do all of our voicemails is that then gets routed to your email. So any voicemail for one of these things, if I call your office and leave you a voicemail, it sends a little audio file right to my email, which I can read on my cell phone and listen to the
Okay.
voicemail.
So even if your power goes out, if there's some sort of an emergency, you're
Yes.
still able to
Your
eventually access those phone calls. Like calls are
yeah.
still coming in.
Your
People aren't
phone
just calling in.
system,
Huh.
exactly. Your phone
That's
system
very
is
helpful.
never down.
Got it.
That's why you can also, if it's just a big snowstorm like we get up here in the North Country from
Yeah.
time to time, you can completely route these just by going online from home, route it to your cell phone. So if I call your office and I press your extension or call the main number, my cell phone rings. And I know that's what's happening for the day. I can say I'm actually home. We're having a big snowstorm, but I can
Mm-hmm.
take your call.
Oh,
Yeah,
very cool.
so the amount of flexibility it gives you for $30 to $40 per month per handset is pretty huge. Really terrific.
Welcome back to the Team Nerd Tech Show with your host, Tim Gillen. I am Ruthy Kirwan. We're going to move in now to Tech Gadget. And I wanted to talk to you today about how, spoiler alert, Google is really listening and recording us on our apps. Like, who would have thought?
Who would have
So
thought?
we have this link that you sent me here today from usatoday.com, but also, I mean, it's not exactly breaking news. It just kind of, this article from USA Today breaks it down really what exactly Google is doing. So can you tell me how are they recording us? Because they say in a lot of ways that they're not, but they really are. So can you
Well,
explain the kind of
yeah.
more insidious kind of ways that Google is tracking
And
us in real
and
time?
in this way, Google is exactly the same as Apple with Siri. And in this way, and the same with Amazon with Alexa. They're exactly the same, but they have to be. So think about this. You're in your car and you say, hey, Google, call my office. Or you say, hey, Siri, call my whatever. Or you say you're home and you say, hey, Alexa, play this music.
Yeah.
How does it hear you? Well, it has to be listening all the time. And they're going to say, well, we don't pay any attention till you say, hey, Siri, but
Yeah, they
it's
say they have
listening.
a wake word and you
Well, they
so
have a wake word. That's what just kind of turns it on so it responds to you and knows to actually obey what you're telling it to do.
yeah,
But it has to be listening all the time,
to
obviously.
hear the wake word.
Yeah, there's no, I mean, how else would it know? So it's listening all the time. And so they end up recording a lot. Now, there's been stuff back and forth between both Google and Apple. And I think Amazon also, where it turns out they were listening a lot more than what they said they were and had people listening to recordings. Now they were doing this allegedly so that they could do they could do a better job of making sure that that commands were routed properly. But they heard people with having
I
intimate
mean,
conversations. They heard drug
yeah.
deals. They heard crime stuff. They heard uncomfortable conversations among family members. All this kind of stuff that you're thinking, oh, wait a second.
Awkward.
Yeah, very awkward. I didn't buy this for that. But you
Yeah.
kind of did because it can't all be machine learning. The machine learning is all started by people telling the machine what to learn and how. Keep this in
Mm-hmm.
mind. So
No, it's
before
a good point.
Apple knew enough when you said, Siri, show me a map to this theater, that someone had to be able to program Siri to say, here's what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Bring up this app, show me a map too. I got to look and see where I'm at right now. I got to look and see where this theater is, and I got to put it together, the driving directions, and I got to put that up on the phone. There's about 5 things that have to happen there. All we expect it instantaneously, or we think it's a crappy system. And Apple knows that we have to think, and Google, they all know if it's not near instantaneous, nobody will use it.
Mm-hmm.
They'll all roll their eyes at how silly it is. So there's humans that are involved in learning this, and this thing is listening all the time. And the way that they make it better is they do a lot of recordings, and then they compare how long did this take for us to do this? How can we make it better? Well, Tim, that sounds great that they need to make it better. Sure, they do. Until
But
they're
in order
listening
to
to an
get
awkward.
there, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
that's why.
creepy.
That's what they're doing. And so that this article we have on the USA Today tech section, which is actually has a lot of good stuff on it and a lot of good consumer everyday type stuff. I like it. I keep an eye on it. And but they talked about how much Google's actually listening all the
How much
time,
they
and
actually are listening.
they
Yeah,
actually are. And you can insert again Amazon Alexa and Apple Siri.
anything.
It's interchangeable. They all have to do this. It's the only way that they can work. Keep this in mind now. And so if you want to be able to say across the room, and then maybe you've wired your phone up as a smart home, hey Google, turn up the temperature 2 degrees. Or, hey, Siri, turn the lights down in the family room. The only way that can happen is if it's listening all the time. So let's just keep in mind, as it says in this USA Today tech article that we have here, that for Google, for Amazon Alexa, for Apple Siri to work, for those voice command things to work, they have to be listening all the time. You can't shout just say across the living room, hey Alexa, turn on this music, if it's not always listening.
If it's not always listening for you to say that.
So,
and by design, listening to everything else you're saying.
It's going to be, in theory, it's only going to spring to life when it hears, hey Alexa, but it must listen all the time so that it knows to spring to life when you say, hey Alexa.
Yeah.
And so they record a lot of it so that they can do their own fine tuning to make sure it only springs to life at the right time. And when it springs to life, it does what you want it to. So it's listening all the time. And so there's another privacy issue. Think about how much you want this to actually do anything. Just know what's happening there. And it would be nice if they had a little button on the front that could turn it off.
Yeah, that would be handy.
They don't, because they don't want to do that. They want to be able to listen all the time so that they can use that to make it better. But then you become part of the grand experiment of voice-activated artificial intelligence. So,
my husband has an Irish accent, as you know, because he's from Ireland, and Alexa can never understand him. And also my 3-year-old speaks with a lisp and he doesn't pronounce words correctly. And so Alexa doesn't understand him either. And sometimes I want to be like, if you're listening to everything else we're saying, can't you listen to the fact that Alexa in this house means Alexa?
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, you'd think.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah, they're not quite as far along as we'd like them to be.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Tim. Well, thank you for hanging out with me again this week and solving the world's tech problems one issue at a time. Let's hang out again next week and discuss more, okay?
Sounds good to me. Thanks.
All right, thanks.